I'm here with the Oracle Outlook for the week starting March the 5th, 2018. I'm very excited about doing this week's Oracle Outlook because my birthday happens to be falling on the calendar this week. My birthday is going to be Wednesday, March the 7th, and so I'm very excited to see what happens to be in the cards for me this week. Because as long as I've been doing these readings, I know enough to know this, that when I'm reading for all of you, that there are messages in the weekly reading that apply to me as well, being the reader. So again, I'm looking forward to seeing what's in the cards for me this week. And so since I've acknowledged my birthday, I also want to take a moment to acknowledge those of you who may be sharing a birthday with me on the same day. So if your birthday happens to be March the 7th this week, I also want to acknowledge you, as well as those of you who are celebrating a birthday any day this week. I just want to say happy birthday to all my fellow Pisceans this week. So the deck that I've chosen to assist me, I'm being very self-indulgent with the deck. I'm working with one of my favorite decks for this week's reading, and so the deck is the Arcana Tarot Playing Cards. The deck is by Chris Ovdiyanko, and it is published by Dead on Paper. And the reason why I love this deck so much, it combines two of my loves. It combines tarot and playing cards. So that is the reason for the deck selection. So since I've already talked about that, let's just jump right in now and pick up the cards, and we're going to shuffle them. And we're focusing on the intention and question of what do we need to know for the week ahead. So I'm feeling one more time will be great. All right. Now I'm going to go ahead and cut the deck. Fan the cards out. And when I work with this deck these days, I tend to do a line of 5. So I'm looking for 5 cards, and they're speaking to me already in the fan that are getting my attention. We have 3, we have 4, and 5. All right, so I picked the cards. Now I'm picking up the rest of the deck, and we're going to put that to one side. So now I have the 5 cards face down in front of me, and I'm going to start with the middle card. If you're no stranger to these videos, then you know when I look at the middle card, I'm looking to see what the central issue is for the week, or what we're being asked to focus on for the week going forward. So here we have, so here we have the High Priestess card. So for me, this card is significant because it's a Major Arcana card, and so Major Arcana cards for me carry more weight in a reading when they show up. They highlight important issues or events for me. The High Priestess is a card for me that represents that we are being encouraged to be led with our intuition this week. This is a week where we're being asked to focus on our intuition since it's the focus card. So for me, it could just be a matter of me doing what I love to do, is doing readings, because the High Priestess is a person who is involved in the intuitive arts, and so tarot happens to be one of those. So if you're not a tarot person, it could just be saying to, like, you may be focusing on psychic development, intuitive development. That could be working with a metaphysical tool or discipline. So besides tarot, could be like you are being asked to focus on your dreams, astrology, numerology, palmistry, things of that nature. Anything that you would consider an intuitive or metaphysical art. If you're studying that, sometimes I see this because of the water on the card, you're being encouraged to go deeper in your study. So for me, keeping this relative, this is the year, I think I may have mentioned this before in this forum, but this is the year for me that I am delving more deeply into my playing card or cartomancy practice, because I have been reading tarot most of the time that I have been reading cards. Most of the focus has been on tarot. But this year, I decided that for my own personal development as a cartomancer, that I wanted to focus more on reading playing cards. So I'm seeing this for me as a signal or a nod to go deeper in that study. Now, if it's not about that, sometimes the High Priestess can be about maybe you're focusing on needing to make a choice or a decision. If that fits for you, when the High Priestess shows up, she represents adopting a wait-and-see approach. She's all about needing further information. So it could be a matter of, if you're needing to make a decision, now's not the time, because you may need to wait for further information. If you're a person who is going through something having to do with your romantic life, your love life, that kind of thing, sometimes the high priestess is encouraging two possibilities to consider. So the first one is that you may be working through some sort of disappointment in your love life, because that's the first thing that I see with this card. So it could be a matter of working through some level of disappointment with your love life. In the other lens, it could be like if you are in a relationship, sometimes the high priestess could be encouraging you to be working on becoming more independent. She's a very independent person, so it could be a matter of learning to become more independent, because she's the number 2 card, and so 2 is all about creating a sense of balance. So it could just be a matter of this idea that maybe we're in a space where we have adopted a more dependent approach towards our relationships and people. And now I'm being tempted to say this could just be in the romantic sense, but this could just be in relationships, just generally speaking, right? So it could be a matter of how can we create a sense of becoming more independent in our relationships across the board, or that you have swung too far the other way and you have become fiercely independent and you have a strong belief in that you don't need anybody, right? So it could be like the single person who isn't in a relationship. The idea of, like, I'm hearing in my head, it's like the person who may be saying, like, I don't need a man, right? It's not a matter of need. It could just be a matter of you are wanting to be in a relationship. You're wanting to share aspects of your life with another person, right? It's not about need, right? But sometimes people talk in that context because they are fiercely independent. So it's like, if you are on the dependent side, how can you become more independent? And if you are fiercely independent, how can you work on allowing yourself to depend on other people, even just a little bit more? So that is how I would look at the high priestess in the middle of the line this week. So now let's take a look at the first card in the line. And so here we have, here we have the Empress card. So the Empress is another major arcana card. So there's this idea here, there's a lot of feminine energy here, with the high priestess and the Empress being the first 2 cards that we are talking about that are showing up in the reading this week. So now the Empress is all about productivity. So it could be a matter of somebody is working on wanting to become more productive in something. Somebody is working on wanting to maybe grow in an area. So going with the people who are working with their intuitive arts or on their intuitive ability, you're wanting to see maybe some growth and development with that. It could also be too, like, you are being asked in this sense to consider the idea that your intuition is something that you are naturally born with. I tend to look at the Empress as talent, skills, and abilities, but those that we come into the world with, those that we are born with, and we are all born with some degree of intuition. I believe that for everyone, right? I don't believe this idea that, you know, some people have it and some people don't. The only difference between people who are maybe considered more psychically gifted or have a strong sense of intuition is that they have spent time and energy cultivating that. They have spent some time and energy into growing and developing that particular talent, right? So for somebody may be discovering their latent, because that's the word that's coming to me, their latent sense of psychic ability or intuition, right? So there is that. Now, for the person who may be, you know, in the space of being disappointed in love, let's stay with that. The Empress card is urging you to spend some time taking care of yourself, because I look at this as self-care. So what could you do to kind of nurse yourself through the sense of disappointment that you're experiencing? Because this card is saying too, like, this is an opportunity for you to take care of yourself, right? The other thing here with this card, and I tend to see this with women more so than men when it shows up, it could just be a matter of making sure, if you're a woman watching this, making sure that you are doing your level best to not neglect your own needs because you're spending so much time and energy taking care of those around you. One of the typical messages for me with this card is about a person who spends so much time and energy being the caretaker and meeting the needs of everyone around them that they do it at the expense of themselves. So if that resonates with you, how could you work on creating a sense of nurturing and taking care of yourself a little bit more this week? What would you be willing to do to honor yourself the way you honor other people, right? And then with the high priestess might be saying one of the ways that you could do that is to find some time, even if it's a small amount, of alone time. right? Remember, because the high priestess is about fostering the sense of independence, right? So it could just be a matter of you carving out some me time. So that's how I would look at the Empress. Now, taking a look at the card in between them, okay. So here we have the Eight of Hearts. So now I'm going to revisit what I said about this person who's the caretaker and maybe neglecting his or her own needs. We'll make that for men too, so his or her own needs. This card is all about creating balance in our relationships, because the number 8 is all about balance, but it's all about healthy relationships, right? So it's just as important for you to be taking care of yourself as you are with other people, because that is how you create healthy relationships. It's based on balance, right? And since I'm talking about that, the Eight of Hearts is also this idea about relationships in which there's a sense of either mutual love or mutual admiration. So there is that to consider. It's about feeling the same way. It's about being around people who feel the same way about one another, right? The feeling, the idea with this card is about the feeling being mutual, right? So there is that. Now, another thing, and this has to do with the idea I talked about, intuition, right? And the person developing his or her psychic ability with the High Priestess. Then this card is all about our guardian angels. I tend to look at this as a guardian angel card. So for that person, you may be working on establishing a closer connection or relationship with your guardian angels. And when I get this card, the message with your guardian angels is that whether you're actively working with them or not, if you just appreciate the sense that you have angels around you, then the angels want you to know that you are being watched over and that you are being protected. So that is how I would look at the Eight of Hearts. Okay, I'm being said to say this. For the person who may be experiencing this idea of maybe being disappointed in love, the Eight of Hearts is asking you to consider this idea about what would you need to do to emotionally move on from that space of being disappointed, right? Because this card is asking you to consider moving on, right? Another thing with this card is about detox. So it could just be a matter of detoxifying yourself from those negative or challenging emotions surrounding this idea about being disappointed in love. Would you be willing to do that this week? The Eight of Hearts is urging you to consider that as an option. So there we go with that. The card wants to say one more thing. For the person who may be exploring intuitive arts, if you are a crystal person, if that is your thing, you're into stones, you're into rocks, you're into crystals, the Eight of Hearts is known as the amethyst rose card for me. So somebody's being asked to either do one or two things, either carry amethyst on your person, and you want to consider doing that for a month, because the Eight of Hearts is a full lunar cycle. That's a month in time. So you want to consider doing that for a full month. And this is why, because the other thing with the amethyst carrying it out, it's a stone for me that represents spiritual purification. So it kind of goes along with what I was just talking about with this idea about detoxifying, right? So somebody may need to be doing that as a form of spiritual purification, and you're being asked, if amethyst resonates with you, to carry it on your person. So that could be a piece of jewelry or a stone that you actually carry in your pocket, that you carried on your person for a month. Okay, so now let's move on to the next card. So here we have the King of Clubs. So King of Clubs could represent a man. I tend to look at kings as representing men. So in this case, the clubs would represent a person who is a working man or a man who's in business. So there could be some business component. If we go with the idea here that the High Priestess is about waiting for a decision or waiting for information regarding a decision, it could be about having to do with business, or it could be about having to be in a business relationship with another person, specifically a man. So there is that to consider. This card would suggest somebody who's a friend or somebody who's friendly, because clubs for me represent friendships and social activity. So if it's not a person that you work with or a person who is connected to you through some sort of business relationship, then this could just be a matter of being social, or somebody who's a friend. It could also be too that somebody is engaging in a relationship with a man, if I go with the idea that the Eight of Hearts as the mirroring card represents mutual love and admiration. It could be about like mutual love and admiration with a man, and the man feels the same way about you. So there is that. I'm taking a step back to consider what else. Okay. So for the person who may be doing some sort of spiritual work, keeping with the idea that clubs represents work, and you're putting effort into that, then the king could symbolically represent getting to a place where you are achieving some level of mastery. The king for me represents mastery, control, some level of authority, that kind of thing. So it could just be a matter of you maybe are moving in your practice and you're becoming a spiritual teacher, spiritual authority, that kind of thing with the King of Clubs. So now let's take a look at the final card and round out this week's reading. And here we have, okay, so here we have the 9 of Spades. So when I'm reading cards and a spades card shows up at the end of the line, it represents that we may be working our way into a problem, going with clubs being work. Then the spade after that could be like working our way into a problem or a difficulty that we may need to solve. Or again, a decision needing to be made, going with the high priestess representing waiting for information so you can make a decision. Then this card would come up to say, okay, the decision process needs to happen now. So the 9 of Spades could just represent this idea of being concerned. So the problem or difficulty, could be around some sort of loss or disappointment. So we have this sense of disappointment being repeated in 2 cards. So it could just be a matter of working through that. The 9 in that regard could be a matter of something that is considered unfinished business. So this sense of disappointment could be a matter of being involved in a situation, a problem or difficulty because we haven't resolved it. And so this card is coming up to say, what would you be willing to do to resolve that problem or that difficulty this week? So on that note, I will go ahead and end this week's Oracle Outlook. I'm James Himm Mitchell, and as I wrap up and close, I'd like to thank you for sharing space here with me for this week's reading, and I look forward to sharing the same space with you again in our next video reading together. So until then, I'm hoping that you have a wonderful day, and I'm hoping that you have a tarot-tastic week. Take care.